Hello, I'm Sonya Friedman. Does the Constitution work for all Americans? We draw the battle lines on that issue. And that funny, sharp-tongued waitress from Cheers, Rhea Perlman, tells us about her work to get better child care for working parents. That and more next on Sonya Live in L.A.
Guess where Bill is? Blue chip Bill? Gotta be.
It's Sonya, live in L.A. with Sonya Friedman.
Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of our show. Rhea Perlman, a working mother, talks about getting better child care for working parents later this hour. But now, let's take a look at the U.S. Constitution. It's on the battle lines. The preamble to the Constitution says, "We the people." But is it really working for everyone? Edwin Lawson says that it isn't. You may remember him because several years ago he earned the name Walkman by walking through white neighborhoods in Southern California to test the constitutionality of vagrancy laws. 4 years ago, the United States Supreme Court struck down the law, saying that it should be redefined. Now, on the other side of our issue today is Robert W. Bennett, Dean at Northwestern University's Law School. Welcome, gentlemen. Let me start with you, Mr. Lawson. What is it, when you say that we the people doesn't mean all of the people, what do you mean?
Well, I think your initial question, does the Constitution work for everyone, should probably be asked as three different questions. It should be asked in terms of where the Constitution was when it started 200 years ago, where it is now, and where it is likely to be in the future. I think if you take the phrase that you preamble the Constitution with, "we the people," you understand that the original founding forefathers, or forepersons, if you will, set up a Constitution which defined the phrase, "we the people," as not we the people, but as those of us at that time, 200 years ago, who were white, wealthy, and male. The evolution of America's history has been that each decade has taken that phrase, "we the people," and expanded it, has taken that umbrella and opened it wider and wider to cover more people, to cover blacks, to cover women, to cover various other quote-unquote minority strata of our particular society. I think if one asks the question about the utility of the American Constitution as it portends for the future, one sees in the present administration in Washington, one sees in the former Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court and the present Chief Justice, those factions who very largely, oddly enough, ironically enough, represent the same white, wealthy males that in fact were the original quote-unquote founding forefathers, and more dangerously, apparently seem to be intent on taking that phrase, "we the people," back to where it was, which is to offer a constitution that umbrellas an increasingly smaller number of Americans. The question of whether the Constitution is working or not is a question of simply who you are at any particular moment in American history.
Let's stop on that point. Dean Bennett, that is a major accusation about a document that we will be celebrating this very year.
Well, yeah, it is. I'm not sure that the accusation really should be leveled at the Constitution. There are lots of quarrels that one could have about specific interpretations of the Constitution, but basically it is a document that sets a framework within which governmental decisions are made and then sets certain very limited restraints on what those governmental decisions should be. And if Mr. Lawson has quarrels with some decisions that are made about our society, I suspect that his quarrels are largely with legislatures and administrative bodies and not with the Constitution. Now, that is not to say that you can't have differences of opinion about constitutional interpretations. They issue forth all the time, and Supreme Court decisions are decided 5-4, and there are lots of debates about them. I would think that one of the remarkable things about the document and the system that has operated under it has really been how adaptable it has been to extraordinarily changed circumstances. I would agree with a good deal of Mr. Lawson's rendition of the history and changes, although I do think that I don't think of either Chief Justice Berger or Chief Justice Rehnquist as particularly rich in contemporary terms. I mean, he just doesn't disagree with some of the, he just disagrees, Mr. Lawson disagrees with some of their decisions. I think it's probably unfair and unnecessary to say that they either are or are attempting to return the country to a regime of rule by wealthy, white, and rich people.
Well, let's get some examples. I think in all fairness that a critique of the Constitution or its interpretation has been leveled, and give us the way that you see that it is not equal for all people, but is really more equal if you're white and male.
Well, let me let me do this. Let me first of all respond to
Sure.
the distinguished gentleman in Chicago. I think that there's probably what one could call intellectual fiction that seems to underpin this notion that a document does anything. The document is meaningless without the executive branch and how it chooses to interpret it. The document is meaningless without the judicial branch and what it chooses to do. My particular concern is that you have in this administration, that you have in the present Chief Justice, that you have in the former Chief Justice, people who are actually, I guess, the very originators of the word mean-spirited, who are taking a look at the Constitution and every other mechanism at government's control to restrict the protections for the largest number of people. And I don't think that that's a quarrel that falls outside of the purview of the Constitution. There is no Constitution. The piece of paper never did anything, and I think only those who live in isolated towers of intellectualism would give any sort of, how would one say, metaphorical powers to the Constitution.
Let me ask you a couple of things, okay? Because whether or not it may be personally offensive to me or I think it is right, that when the Nazis wanted to march in Skokie, Illinois, that they were protected and permitted to march, that the Ku Klux Klan can be an organization here in this country. That
and I think, well, they should be. I don't have any problems there. The problems that I have...
women were just allowed a very controversial decision about being permitted more than just competing in terms of competency, but to open up an affirmative action kind of ruling. Isn't that all because we have this document, which is to some a wonderfully adaptable document?
That's interesting.
I agree with Mr. Lawson, by the way, that I wouldn't state it as extremely as he did, but I agree with him that the enforcement mechanism, the interpretive mechanism, the courts, and to a degree the executive branch is a very important part of the system, and that it's really misleading to talk about the document as doing these things, good or bad. I agree with that.
Well, let me cover 2 points, if I may,
Sure.
Sir and Madam, respectively. The thing that I want to caution you about is this. What you've done is sort of like the people in Brooklyn, of which there seem to be a large number of whom are near psychotic in the top of the second inning when the Dodgers are not playing there. Those particular high-profile media successes are to be measured with the overall score. They're to be measured with the score at the bottom of the ninth. This particular administration, more so than any other, has embraced George Orwell's 1984 in their ability to manipulate media. For every foot of progress that you see them push to the front page, there are miles of digression. There are miles of access to the court that have been, in fact, limited or destroyed. There are miles of budgets that have been emaciated or destroyed that would protect women, that would protect blacks, that would protect Hispanics, that would protect the young. I think that if one looks at the total score, we see an administration which would probably be very comfortable if they could slide the judiciary back into powdered wigs, and we could, in fact, return the Congress to a men's club exclusively if we could, in fact, return the basic notion to voting to those who are propertied and well-heeled. It's a question of history never freezes. There's never a single second in history. History is always moving one way or the other. And if the Reagan/me/Berger/Rehnquist faction could have its particular discretion at the helm of state, that particular ship of state is moving backwards. And my concern simply is that I think not quite enough people are particularly aware of that.
Dean Bennett, we'll get with you in a minute. I'd like to open up our phone lines to our viewers. They would like to get in on this conversation, and when we continue, we'll get to you and then the phones. But we'll give you a chance to get in on this discussion and debate. Here's our number. It's 213-460-5080.